to me about a year and a half ago and said that they really wanted to do something out of the ordinary, something that was going to help faculty move service learning along, give it some prominence, and fill a void. In particular, they wanted to develop an online journal to give faculty an opportunity to showcase their research and their pedagogy. And so that group has been working very, very hard over the last 18 months to make the Journal of Service Learning in Higher Education possible. And about 2 weeks from now, we will be unveiling the inaugural edition of the Journal of Service Learning in Higher Education. So we wanted to spend some time this afternoon giving you some information, some very good information about the opportunities that this journal presents. And to get us rolling here, I want to turn the microphone over to Steve Grusbeck. Steve.
So it was about 7 years ago when the council was formed, and really we wanted to find ways to disseminate best practices about service learning and improve education for students and bring faculty and students together so that teaching can take place and learning can take place outside the classroom. And these conferences were a huge step towards that. And we began thinking about additional ways of doing that. And this is how we came up with the idea about the journal. But one of the things that we really wanted to make sure of was that this was a peer-reviewed journal. This would be a journal that is actually not only reviewed by members of the council, by faculty members who are part of the UL system, but also to find peer mentors, to find peer reviewers who are outside of the system, who are outside of the state, who are all around the country. So at this point we have about an equal mix of reviewers, peer reviewers who live here in Louisiana as well as who live outside of the state. And our goal is to find as many interesting contributions to this journal and continue to push service learning as a really great tool for teaching and for learning. David has volunteered to serve as the head editor, and he's done a fantastic job of promoting the journal here as well as at the Gulf South Summit. We were in Gulf South Summit is a regional conference. About a dozen states meet each year for the Gulf South Summit. We were just in Hattiesburg, Mississippi about a month ago, and I was utterly delighted to see among a list of about a dozen or so different journals listed, there was our journal listed as one of the exemplary journals that is out here or out there promoting service learning as a tool for teaching. So I'd like for David to talk a little bit more about the journal, and here he is.
I think I might. Every time I walk into a room like this, I say, I know who you are, because I know who you are. You know, I know what you've done. I know how you got here. I know what your experience is. I know it led you into doing service. I know it led you into this room. I know why you're here at this conference. I know why you teach what you teach. I say this kind of thing. I say this to students. Today was another shock to me when our speaker said that he was a former DJ and he played music, because I also was a former DJ. And so, you know, again, I know how he got to where he was too. Now it's different, much different. Not much different. He was, or he is a club DJ. I was radio DJ for about 15 years. And the difference between a club DJ and a radio DJ is a club DJ talks in front of a lot of people, and a radio DJ mumbles to themselves and imagines that there's really no one out there, and that makes it a whole lot easier to talk. And so what I would say when I'm standing in front of a group of people like this, if I'm thinking about my radio announcer days, I would say, instead of playing music, I would just say, close your eyes. Think about the person who you love the most. Think about singing to them. And doesn't that feel good? And just stop there. You don't get to hear any music. I'm going to stop right there. How I got here, because people ask me that, just like they ask our keynote speaker, how do you get here? And I'll tell you, it's a weird journey, because it's logical to me. I started working in radio, and then I thought, well, I want to go to college, and so I got a bachelor's degree in mass communication. I have a master's degree about a dozen years after that in social work, and then my doctorate's in family studies. Now, all of that makes perfect sense to me, and I know you're thinking it doesn't make that much sense. But one of the things that happens when you are working in broadcasting is you get called in. I mean, just think about it. Think about the radio stations you listen to, the TV stations that you watch. They're always promoting a cause in the community. You always involve the people in broadcasting in the community. Now, when I was in radio, I used to call that faux altruism, because the bottom line is we really wanted to promote Big Brothers Big Sisters. We really wanted to, March of Dimes, March Walkathon. We really wanted to raise money for St. Jude's, as long as we were exclusive and no one else in the community got to raise money for St. Jude's. It's like we're by ourselves. So it wasn't really about St. Jude's, it's about how good we looked as we raised money for St. Jude's. That's the way a lot of it worked. But here's the thing that happens if you do it long enough. If you do it long enough, you learn about the agencies that you're promoting. You learn about the causes that you're promoting. And then what you end up doing is you start doing it on your own time, and you don't tell people that you work in broadcasting. I mean, you start raising money for St. Jude's, and you do the walkathons anyway, and you become a big in Big Brothers Big Sisters, and you're not telling anybody about it. And it has nothing to do with raising money for that agency. It's getting caught up in what it means to really work in the community. The first service event that I did, that I recall, I was 16 years old, and it was, I think my parents were trying to get rid of me. Come to think of it, they used to ship me to this farm too. Wait a minute, I'm starting to feel bad about this whole thing. I went with a group. It was primarily a church group, although it wasn't, sort of. We were working with an Appalachian Service Project with something called the Redford Mission. The group ended up being associated with Vista, you all know about Vista. Also with a group of churches, and the United Methodist Church was a group that I went with, and we spent a couple of weeks in the mountains around Corbin, Kentucky specifically, and we just wandered into the mountains, and we would tear out the walls of houses, which weren't, we'd tear out the newspaper that was taped and nailed to the inside of the houses, and then we'd put up sheetrock, and we'd put up sheetrock in the ceiling and sheetrock on the walls. And we'd build porches because they'd be on a hill, and there wouldn't be a back porch. There'd be a back door. If you'd open it up, it might be a 12-foot drop or 15-foot drop. So we'd build stairs. You've seen that movie Justified? Or the television show Justified? You watch that? I watched for the first time. I don't know. I got it on like Netflix. Very first episode, you go into Corbin, Kentucky. I remember Corbin, Kentucky. When I was 16 years old. I remember that when I was 16 years old. I remember a little girl who had a disability, and I have no idea what the disability was. She was 13 years old. She was in diapers. She couldn't speak. She couldn't feed herself. She couldn't bathe herself. She couldn't walk. I called her Sissy. And they'd change her, and they'd feed her, and they'd put her in front of the window and have her just watch us work. And then, then we would leave and come back, and the day would start again. We'd start every morning. We'd get to whatever house we're working on, and I worked specifically on one house. And I'd walk in, and there was a 6-year-old in there who would go into the kitchen, and he'd be sitting in the kitchen, and he wouldn't have on a shirt. And it was hot, too. This was summer. He'd have on shorts and no shirt. He'd be sitting at the kitchen table smoking a cigarette, drinking a cup of coffee. And he said, Dave, just can't get started in the morning without a cigarette and a cup of coffee. And I thought, what am I supposed to do with this information? And I remember, I looked at him and said, me neither. Sat down, had a cigarette, cup of coffee with a 6-year-old, I never told my mother that story, so we'll edit that out. I was 16 years old. That was more than 16 years ago. Oh, wait a minute. It was more than 40 years ago. How long ago was that? I'm now in my mid-50s. I'm one of those baby boomers. I remember what Sissy looked like. I remember that 6-year-old. I was 16 years old. That was the thing that got me started, I think, in service. Although, we didn't call it service learning, we didn't call it community service. I don't know what we called it. You saw the presentation. We were baby boomers. We got together and we did something. And we still get together and we do something. And everybody in this room, everybody on the Service Learning Council, everybody in administration of the system, Jackie, Sissy, everybody, all have the same kind of, you can all relate some experience that you had, just like what I had. And so it doesn't matter the discipline. It doesn't matter what your academic trajectory was. You have this thing behind you, this thing that sort of pushes you along. And that's where this came from, is that, we have this thing that's pushing us along, and when we fell into education, and a lot of us just fell into education, we knew that the best way to teach was an experiential method. Where you really want to show this, you really want them to get it, you want them to feel it. They have to get their hands dirty. They have to go into Corbin, Kentucky, or they have to just go out into the quad, and do something. So I saw in the classroom where my group was in room 131. I first walked into 131, and what did we see on the board? English such and such is meeting outside today. That's what I saw. Well, I went outside after I saw them sitting outside. They're sitting, and so I took a picture of the quad. It was a very pretty campus. Took a picture of the quad going back to the building with the English class outside, and I thought, I don't have no idea what they're talking about, but all the students seemed engaged, and it was just shaking them up a little bit, so I'm glad we were able to do that for them. This came out of that, all of this idea. We're going to shake you up a little bit, do something. And I know, what Steve said is, we wanted a journal. And it's funny because we did sort of talk about that. I wasn't here 7 years ago. I wasn't on the council 7 years ago. That was Dr. Jeff Sanders from UL Lafayette. And when I took over for him, I can tell you all, in the past 20 years, I can tell you the only 4 people who have been deans of community service at UL Lafayette, because we all know each other. We just pass it off to the next guy. We all know each other on every campus. We all have that same kind of experience. And I came in 2008, I think. I have to ask y'all, when did I come? I think I came in 2008. And it's funny because and it was exactly what you heard Dr. O'Hara say. When I first told someone, we're doing the conference, they said, is that the conference where we learn how to write a grant? And I thought, I was on the committee where we were looking at the presentations. None of the presentations had to do with writing a grant. And so I said, no, I don't know what you went to, but this is not about writing a grant. Well, 2 years before that, it was about writing a grant. I just didn't know it was the same thing. And now we've moved all the way to this. This is the kind of conversations that we have every couple of weeks. What do we do with what we know? Because the biggest problem, the biggest obstacle that we face, all of us in this room and in higher education, is we're driven to do what we do. We're driven to teach well through experiential teaching. We're driven to do service because we know what our position in the community is. I had that conversation with Robert McKinney just a minute ago. We know what being involved in the community, being involved on campus means, but we don't really get evaluated that way. What do your teaching evaluations look like? And we all know, we don't want to go there. You know, it's like, oh, I'll give you an A, say something good about me, you know, and then, okay, now that's done, I'll give you the grade you earned. But anyway, you know, there's that, and then there's research, and then there's service. Now, we know that all the faculty are doing service. We know that. I know that because I asked them and I counted. But they don't tell each other that they're doing service, and they don't tell their bosses and their department heads and you know, the presidents. They don't tell them that because their department heads and their deans are evaluating them on their research, on their grant, on their teaching. We just know they're doing service. And so when we said where there was a hole, because faculty would say, you know, I want to talk about it, but the bottom line is I talk about it and people say, why are you talking about that? Tell me what you're writing. We need a place, when you write it, there needs to be more and more places to talk about it. There needs to be more and more places to put it. That's why this conference is no longer about writing a grant. This is a place to talk about it, a place to put it. And that's why we wanted a journal, because it's a place to talk about it. It was a place to put it. Where is it? There it is. An outlet for sharing the methodologies and pedagogical approaches that lead to effective community-identified outcomes. I cut and pasted that from the website that where the journal was. I don't think I even wrote it. I don't know. Did I write that? I don't know. I wrote that. Jackie wrote that. Our primary emphasis is to provide an outlet for sharing the methodologies and pedagogical approaches that lead to effective community-identified outcomes. We do service. We know it works. But we want to present it in a sound, research-based way that makes sense to all of us as academics, but also makes sense to all of our peers as academics, and our administrators as academics, and to our legislators as academics, and everybody who's involved in what is success in higher education. You know who's involved, but I'll tell you, I have to list this every time, because I'll tell you, I wanted to do this by myself. I really and truly, I wanted to do this by myself. There was no way it was going to happen by myself. And when I was talking to everybody in the council, what I found out is everybody in the council wanted something like this. They all wanted to do it by themselves, and there was no way it was going to happen by themselves. This is what it takes to pull this thing off. It takes the system, and it takes all of these campuses, people at every single one of these campuses. Notice a little shout out there, McNeese, y'all done a great job at McNeese today. It takes all of these campuses and people at every single one of these campuses to really pull this off. And the people who were involved to start with, and you heard Steve Grusbeck say, well, there's lots of folks from all over the place. This is the first list. The list is longer now. There's about 80 now, because they're listed as readers, and they're listed as authors, and they're listed as people who want to review. But this is our base. And what you'll notice about our base, oh, and by the way, you know, I don't have UNO on here, because this I also cut and pasted to start with. This is the first base. Since we started, we're really not long after we got started, then UNO comes in. And so we have people from UNO too. But this is how we first got started, and you see our campuses, and you also see LSU, and you also see University of Tennessee Martin, and you also see Memphis, and you also see University of Texas Arlington, and you also see University of Georgia. What you see are people from all over the place who say, another outlet where we can publish? You bet I'm on board. You know, I want to help too. And so they jumped in, they jumped in for this, they jumped in to be reviewers. These are people who said, yes, I'll join in. Not even a place for me to publish my own work, but I'll be more than happy to help you publish. And so, yeah, you can put my name on the masthead of this thing, and you can send me articles to review. And they have, we did, they do, they have, we did. But that's not all. When the thing went online, and this is online, this is current. You can go to that website and it'll show up again. You can also access it through the system, but ulsystem.edu/ those things, JSLHE. I sort of stumbled through some of that. I went on yesterday, yesterday evening, as a matter of fact, but you know how it is. I have a presentation today, so I had to last night put this together. You know. So last night, this is what, and I didn't, by the way, I left several off because I'm a strong believer in less is more when it comes to this. But here's what I wanted to show you. Hawaii Pacific University, University of Maryland, you know, as far east as you can go and as far west as you can go. The bottom line, these are, by the way, these are people who have registered on the journal site to be authors, to be readers, to be reviewers. They've submitted articles. Many have submitted articles that reviewers have said, yes, please publish these in your inaugural edition. You know, University of New Mexico and Jackson State University, Tennessee State University, Penn State University, Hawaii Pacific, University of Iowa. How'd they even find out about this thing? You know, we're talking about folks who just, I mean, they mine the internet looking for outlets for service learning research and for service research. And they found us there. Now, yes, we have been promoting it. And and I do know someone at Hawaii Pacific University. That's one of the reasons why I put that up there. But the two people that I know at Hawaii Pacific University, neither one of them have registered with the journal. The person who is registered with the journal from Hawaii Pacific University, I've never heard of, and they're not in the department or the college where I know someone out there. I'm pretty sure I didn't tell the person I know at Hawaii Pacific University about the journal. I might have. I don't talk to them that much. But I thought, this is interesting. We put out an initial call. We all got together, and honestly, through Dr. O'Hara and Jackie's work, this came together. We're all involved, and we're working really diligently to make this thing come about, but it really took the system level to say this is going to be successful. And we all know it. Well, I mean, we all have to work together, and it does take the system, and this is a system event. And I'm so pleased because you're going to love it. It's a great album. We put out an initial call, and of course with an initial call there was no response because we didn't really exist yet. But here's something weird, and Jackie and I were talking about it. I said, let's put a deadline and an initial call. So we put a deadline. Well, then we got 30 submissions. Well, we got 35 submissions with a deadline. Well, the deadline, we should have put the deadline February 1st because, now I'm overwhelmed with what we have to do to get this thing together. I've never edited a journal before, by the way. But my learning curve is, we got about 35 submissions, only had about 36 reviewers. Every manuscript gets 2, sometimes 3 reviewers. Do the math. We've got some people who are reading some stuff. I've read every submission. They're every type of service, every type of submission that you can imagine. The reviewers, the external reviewers, I have not picked. The difficult thing about an inaugural edition, one of the things that happens is that we don't have a base. And so it's sort of like, what should this look like? What should the first one look like? And through our conversations, and we talk about every 2 weeks, is the first one should look like the research outlet that we think people are asking for. And 5 submissions, we have, it's about a 17% acceptance rate so far, although many have been, the reviewers said, have this person revise and resubmit. But it's a competitive acceptance rate, good research. About 5 were accepted for publication in our inaugural edition. They're not all very short. They're all research-based. It's over 100 pages. It's a little meaty, and I haven't told Jackie that yet. But the bottom line is, it's good research, and it goes across the spectrum. This is 3, just some sentences from 3 that are coming. Undergraduate perceptions of service learning using a quantitative, qualitative, mixed method approach with findings easily applied across multiple disciplines. Bottom line is, if you use a multiple method approach, especially quantitative, qualitative, that can get long, and most journals will turn it down. And all I can think of was, when people have a lot of tables, a lot of graphics, a lot of pictures, I think it's online. We don't have a publication cost like that, so why not? This should be the kind of outlet where people can put this kind of thing. Report on the justification, introduction, development, and implementation of a broad-based service learning applied to a large public university studying this particular article I really like because it starts from here's how we conceptualized it. And I thought, I don't know if I want us to really do a conceptualization piece. When I get back from the viewers and they say, oh yeah, they really love it. And I wasn't really sure what I thought about it, but all the reviewers really loved it. And so I read the thing again really carefully. And it's so much more than a conceptual piece because it was step by step. Here's how this is going to work, and here's what it looks like, because this is what it looked like when we were done, too, all the way through. An investigation of the challenges of implementing effective service learning versus the economic and time commitment associated with student employment. One of the things that, I don't know how many committees all y'all are on who are faculty in here, but one of the big challenges that we have, I will say one thing though, when I hear faculty say, students there are so much different, they're all working. I think, I worked 30 hours a week when I was in college in the 70s. And so I don't really know, what I was in college in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. We won't talk about that either. But I had to work through, no, wait a minute. I don't think I worked when I was in school in the 80s. I was finding myself. But there's a problem with how do you design, how do you implement a really effective broad-based service learning project involving a lot of students when half of them have a job. They don't have any time. And they really don't have any time, and they really have to work because they don't have any money and they're paying for their way through school, and the bottom line is if they don't work, they're going to drop out of school. And so we're all faced with this kind of, what do we do with this? And and this was a really, is a really nice manuscript on what this looks like, what the challenges are, and how we negotiate our way through those challenges. And there's more to come. And so you can see, we're going to have a really nice first edition. All of the manuscripts, well, most of the manuscripts, one of them's not. All of the manuscripts, except for one, are in author revisions right now for publication. So it's editorial revisions, and I really hope it's very quick. Every time I hear a deadline, it's like phew, I can feel the sweat break out because I'm not exactly sure, but I know we're that close. I know we're days, weeks. It could, because now it depends on how fast do you get stuff back to me? How fast do the authors turn stuff back that we can really put this together. But it's going to be a very nice first edition of our journal, and it's going to be successful, and it's going to be something that all of you who are involved with all of our campuses in the system and the system office are going to be proud to say this is something that we got started and will be sustainable. So you use that website to find us and to promote us. And trust me, we'll let you know when that first one is online. And well, the journal's online now when the first edition is published, because we'll be talking about that real loud too. That's all I have to say about how we got things started as a group. I'm happy to take any questions about the journal, about the process. What do you want to know?
Any questions for
Dr. Yarber?
Yes. Just curious about how many issues a year you anticipate, journal?
Boy, we talk about that every 2 weeks also. We put online that we have no idea what the response would be. We have no idea about the level of work. We put online one a year. That's what we said. And that's why, I'm not at all ashamed to say the first edition will, it's 101 pages, it wasn't that much. I have over 100. When I counted the pages, it was 101. Well, we exaggerate. But anyway, we said once a year, but the response has been very positive. And of course, you can submit a manuscript for review at any time. All of us on the council have agreed once a year is what we promise. additional additions, especially if there's a special topic, if something happens where people want to submit in a special way, or if we have a call for a special topic or a guest editor, there's nothing that suggests we can't publish more than once a year. Maybe twice a year or quarterly, or just whatever is reasonable, we get it out. But we're promising once a year.
Other questions? David, I'd like you to, you and I had a conversation earlier today, and you were talking about, and you made allusion to it here when you said, I've never edited a journal before. Tell us about how difficult that is and the challenges that poses.
Well, it's more time consuming than, it's everything that you would imagine. And everyone in here, we've all written manuscripts, we've all published manuscripts, we've all reviewed for other journals, or certainly many of us, most of us have reviewed for journals. We've done all of the work except for that last piece, which was go back through it again and reread every word and basically do the copy edit for everything that needs to be done. And there's two things that I was unprepared for. One, I was unprepared for having to read so carefully every single word and space, and because it's not checking grammar, it's checking spaces between words. This is going online, and so it has to go online. Basically, it has to come to us, copy ready. It has to go up that way. It'll go up as PDF files. And so I have to check all the spaces, and I have to check, all the fonts, and every time someone has cut and pasted a direct quote, I have to, make sure that's right. Look for any special codes. And so the time involved with that, we've all learned to read really quickly. We can read a manuscript. I can read a 20-page article in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I can't do this. Each one of these manuscripts, is hours of work as I look at every piece. The second thing I was unprepared for is how tedious and time-consuming the process is in going back and forth with authors, and I now forgive every editor who sent me back a terse note when I sent them something. When I would write them things like, I changed that. I've moved that piece of dirt back and forth 5 times. You going to publish it or not? I've said that to editors. Well, now I'm getting that from people. Because, of course, it's back and forth, and review. I'll get 2 reviewers, and one will say, it's excellent, and one will say, this is trash. Well, what do you do with that? Well, what I do with that is send it to another reviewer, because I don't know if it's trash, or I don't really know what's going on with the reviewers who read it. Well, that's another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, however long it takes that reviewer to add that in to what they're doing. When I send it back to authors, they want 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month to do the revisions that they want to do. It is so time consuming and so tedious. And that part I was really unprepared for. I was saying, let's put a March 15th deadline, and we can have this thing out by April 10th without a problem. We put a March 15th deadline, and I've still got, out of the 5 manuscripts, there's still 4 of them with the authors, as they say, I'll have it to you by the 30th of April. Well, that's pretty far away from April 14th. But we do have good manuscripts. I was unprepared for those 2 things. There's a time commitment that, well, I take my hat off to all of you editors. I was unprepared.
We have a question here from Janet.
So if someone wants to serve as a reviewer, who do they contact and what do they need to do?
Piece of cake. You want to serve as a reviewer, you go to the journal website and just register with the journal. And when you register yourself with the journal, it'll give you an option like who do you want to be on our list? Do you want to just read the journal? And by the way, it is an open source journal, so you'll be able to access it without having to register. But I want you to register. I want you to be on the notification list. And we don't send, the emails are just, here's a call for manuscripts. This isn't something where we send you stuff that's happening on every campus or around the world or something. We might send, I can imagine us sending conference information on it. But the bottom line is you register with the journal, and it'll give you the option to register as a reader, an author, a reviewer. Those three things. And you can register as all three. You click reader, you're just on the reader list. You click author, you're on the author and reader list. If you click reviewer, another box is going to open up for you to type in. And in that box, it'll be, what are your interests? What do you believe you can review appropriately? And you can just put down what your discipline is, what your service areas are. And then when I get a manuscript and want to send it to reviewers, I click on, there's a button that says select reviewers for me as an editor, and all of those names will come up, every single one of them. I'll pick someone from the first list, and then the second list is all of those names, and I got to find somebody who's not on the campus that that reviewer came from, and who has a related discipline or interest. I will tell you that twice, I also have the option to go into the reader list and draft someone as a reviewer, and I've done that twice too. When I needed another opinion, I'll go through and grab somebody out of there. But it's very easy. You register on the site, just click reader, author, reviewer, write down what your interests are, click submit. That's it. Nothing to it. And then that makes you visible, to the editors.
David, if I can add to that, having served as a reviewer for 2 manuscripts.
Yes, you have.
The reviewer, the reviewing process, the software that basically helps to manage your work in terms of getting the journal ready to go, is very, very easy. And basically, I cut and paste my comments into the appropriate dialog box, and completed a few other questions that I had to complete with my recommendation and send it back to you. I got a reminder when it was getting close to due time. You turn those around, or you try to extract a commitment of 2 weeks from reviewers?
Well,
is that correct?
There is an automatic time limit. The whole process is really very nice. This is a great program. I appreciate you finding this program. It's a great program. Just about every letter, every correspondence, everything is template driven, including the letters soliciting a review. And there's an automatic, when I click a reviewer, there's an automatic, I think it's almost a month away, there's an automatic date. But it does say, like, in 1 week, go onto the site and click I will do the review, and then it'll give you another period of time. If I need a faster turnaround than that, I can go in and change the dates of those. But it does give me a template. I will admit that when it gives me the option to turn down a manuscript for publication, the standard template is a little terse, and I do change some of the word. At first, because I didn't really see what all was being sent out. I didn't really know until an author wrote back to me directly, and of course at the bottom of their email was the email that the journal site sent. And I thought, man, that's a little harsh. And so I started changing some of those. But it is easy to navigate. It is a template response. As a matter of fact, when you click I will review, just that little button says I will review, what you don't know is it sends me an email from you that says I'm happy to review this article. It gives us the name and the title of the article. And you may know if I reply back and say thank you for doing that, and it's like, I didn't send him an email. Yeah, you did, just by clicking I will do it. So it's a nice process. It's easy to navigate.
Anything else for David?